welcome to this episode of the Strong Kind Podcast. This episode is with Sam Liu. Sam is a PhD in biomechanics. You can find him at Sam_likes_biomechanics_PhD on Instagram. I stumbled upon Sam because he puts out some good content on getting better at dunking and biomechanics, and I thought he has a really interesting and awesome story because it seems like he basically went down this biomechanics and PhD rabbit hole because he wanted to dunk. There's a lot more to Sam's story than that, but it is definitely a really cool and great conversation. I had a lot of fun chatting with Sam, and he makes you think. We got a good rundown of just Newtonian physics in here, and if you want to get better at dunking, this is also a good episode for you to listen to. I really enjoyed it. So thanks so much for being here. Please go follow Sam on Instagram. Thanks for following me. I appreciate it. If you need help with rehab, training, and you want to actually cut through the noise and make progress towards getting out of pain, towards feeling better and getting stronger, healthier, fitter, faster, please reach out to me at dr.dave.strengthandkindness on Instagram. I'd love to help you in any way I can. Thanks so much. Peace. I'm with Dr. Sam Liu. I said your last name correctly, right, Sam?
Yep, perfect.
Beautiful. I always start off with a name botch on some of these, but I appreciate Sam coming on. I was joking with Sam that I've followed him for a while, and he might not know very much about me, but that's kind of the nature of Instagram. But really what made me want to talk to Sam is, I don't know, Sam, you can correct me if I'm wrong. It seems like you got your PhD because you wanted to dunk. Is that true?
That's pretty much it. So I did my undergraduate in the UK at Oxford. I did engineering science. And then I've wanted to do like sports science for the longest time, ever since I was young. Like the ESPN sports science documentaries, they were on TV in China, like fully translated Chinese. So that's when I was like, I love sports growing up, and then I wanted to always find a pathway, but it was difficult. Like the typical expectations, right? My dad was in the engineering field, so I came into the undergraduate wanting to go into the energy industry actually. And then in my third year I came across biomechanics, and at that time I was also playing basketball for the university, where the dunking has always been a goal in each of the off seasons. That was also the time in the dunking space where there's been a lot of discussion, particularly of the techniques in two-foot running jumps. But I was doing some research into what has been done and published in two-foot running jumps specifically, because one-foot running jumps, a lot of track athletes, long jump, high jump, they dominated a majority of jumping-based research alongside counter-movement jumps. But for jumping off 2 feet, it was fairly unexplored. So that's what I wanted to do as a part of my PhD. When I was like coming to the end of my undergraduate degree, I wanted to look into. Honestly, I started to lose hope that I could look at anything nearly as cool as what I ended up doing. I was just eventually at the point where anything that's sports biomechanics, anything that's jumping, I was happy to do. And that's where I got in contact with my PhD supervisor. And we can get into a bit of how we went on, but I wanted to look into two-foot running jumps research because when I graduated, I was just dipping into my toes into biomechanics, doing a master's project for it, but nothing as dynamic as a two-foot running jump. It was a majority of just walking in a straight line or walking and turning.
Okay. So, because a 2-foot running jump, it's more, gait is surprisingly complex, right? It's like a lot of things are weirdly like simple yet complex, right? Like, but a 2-foot running jump sounds much more complex than, just gait. So there's so many directions I want to go with this conversation, but like some of it is like just getting a PhD, like research, that type of thing. It's like, how do you even come up with like the question you want to ask, right? Like, how did you how did you come up with basically what your the question you were going to ask? What ultimately would be like your thesis? What made you like go down that path, or how did you come up with that?
No, that's a great question because it's coming up with a good research question because there can be general questions people ask, right? What is the best way to jump higher? What are the best technique to jump a two running jump as high as possible? But those are not necessarily good research questions because to define a good research questions, you need to define your key variables. You need to look at, okay, what are the governing principles behind the things you're trying to look at? So in the case of biomechanics, especially with whole body movements, the simplest and the best laws that we can rely on are Newton's laws of motion. So that's sort of where my analysis framework in my dissertation sort of began. It's like, okay, we know what the relationships should be between the forces that we exert against the ground and the motion of our body. Because that is very detailed described in like through Newton's laws of motion, like each of the three laws, right? Newton's first law, and actually I do want to briefly like explain because I've explained this in a bunch of different ways, like trying to simplify those laws. I think most people learn it in like physics class in high school, and it's very difficult to connect Newton's laws of motion, going beyond just a box on a slope
Yeah.
to something like human movements.
Yeah. Yeah, run us through the laws again, man, and give us like your how those apply to human move. If I'm gonna put you on the spot,
Yeah.
but
No,
please
no,
do it, man.
I've done this quite a lot of times, and I've thought about this a lot because I'm like, the way it's taught and typically communicated, even in some like physical therapy, kinesiology textbooks, I don't find it to be necessarily as understandable. So I'll try my best to like give my interpretation of it.
Yeah, yeah,
So historically, where these laws come from, it came from Newton's attempts to explain how stars move in the sky. So more recent physicists have begun to identify limitations to this set of laws of motion, but those are far beyond what applies to human movement. These laws break when we are talking about really heavy things like massive black holes or even like planets and stars, and they also break when things are moving really really fast. Neither of those cases matter in human movement. So in human movements, here's how I think about the Newton's three laws. So the first law, it's the law of inertia. It's the one where people say, oh, an object will stay at rest or move at constant velocity unless acted upon by an external force. But really what this describes is like in order for you to move around, a force has to be applied onto you to move you around. If all of the forces applied onto your body are equal, then you are at rest, you are stationary. So typically, as we move around either in the gym, walk around town, there's two forces that primarily act on our body. The number one is gravity, the effect of gravity, and within our field, like I like to describe as like body weight due to gravity, because weight is a force. Weight is a result of gravity acting on your mass, right? That's sometimes you see the distinguishing.
It's a vector, correct? Like there's
Correct. A weight is a vector, and most of the time it's pointed straight downward.
yes,
And then what's countering the weight, what's supporting our weight is the ground reaction forces. So that's really the interaction from us and the ground that when the weight is directly matched with the reaction force, you are in a stable point in space. You are not going to be moving anywhere. In order for you to move down, your reaction forces has to be less than that of gravity. So you have to lose to gravity. In order for you to go up, you have to beat gravity.
yeah, yeah,
So in the case of a two-foot running jump, you have to beat gravity by quite a lot.
yeah, yeah,
So that's the first law. It's like, when you are near stationary or moving at constant velocity, the thing with constant velocity is like, again, it doesn't quite apply with us on the ground because, there's always friction. So there's like constant forces that's acting on the body. And even to maintain constant velocity in like gait, for example, it's not really constant. You're just accelerating, decelerating, accelerating, decelerating.
yeah.
So that's the first law.
Yeah. And I mean, you even like, I mean, so I know the laws. I'm gonna have you keep taking us through them, but like, even just what you did, like, it's funny because I just think about like sitting on the couch, right? And I've kind of thought about this before, but like sitting at the couch, me being at rest. Gravity is always acting up, but like then there is me, like basically, resisting like this. Like I guess, how do you even think about this? Like I'm sitting on the couch, I'm
The
upright.
couch is holding you up. The couch
Yeah,
is holding you up.
yeah,
Yes.
and like so there's like it's the couch reaction force. Like it's me
Pretty
working
much.
against the couch
Yes.
reaction force, right? Which, yeah, it's like it almost it's really funny because I took physics and then I had a little bit. Well, I took physics before I went to physical therapy school, obviously. But until actually like I until like in physics in PT school or in before physical therapy school was not like lifting oriented in any way, shape, or form. When I finally like learned like the moment model and like learning about like leverage and moment and applying physics in that way did a lot of this stuff stick because I was actively working on like and lifting and doing these things. And so yeah, you got to like make this stuff apply to people. And a lot of times like in high school or college, like earlier, you're just doing free body diagrams, and that's cool. But like I was an idiot. I didn't know what was going on. I was just like, I'm trying to pass this class, right? So keep taking us through the laws, though. Give us number 2.
No, but I want to touch on that because it's not necessarily complex, but what's very important about any sort of free body diagrams, because even for a 2 for running jump, there's a free body diagram we can draw. The most important thing is like keeping track of everything. That's what free body diagrams allows us to do.
Yeah.
So Newton's second law, as a nice transition, is like it's the famous equation everyone's very familiar with. It's the F equals ma. That's what people know, right? Force equals mass times acceleration. In that format, it just tells you, hey, here's how we know how much the body is going to move given how much force is applied onto it. If we take a detour down the mathematical lens, if you integrate both sides relative to time, then you get the impulse momentum relationship. Essentially what this tells you is like, okay, you have a force acting on my body, for example. Once it's acted over a fixed duration of time, here's how much my body's movement is expected to change. How does that apply in human movements? Let's say my goal, the objective of the movement, is for me to jump up. That means my body must have an upward velocity by the time I leave the ground. How do I get there? Well, we know if we want to go from a stationary point where our body have no upward velocity to the point of takeoff with very high upward velocity, upward forces must be applied by us, or really equivalently, onto us by the ground over a duration. And these are all causal descriptions, meaning however much force you put into the ground over however much time will directly increase. So we are no longer people talk about correlation versus causation, right? These laws are as close we can get to causation in terms of movements that we can get. So Newton's second law, it's the impulse momentum relationships. It tells us in order for our momentum to change to help us accomplish a task, that task can be jumping up, that task can be maintaining balance, that task can be walking forward during gait. Here's how much force that must be applied. It's a necessity, it's a requirement. That's why we call it, I've described it in my dissertation, the mechanical objective. I think of it as like, that it's the bare minimum for the movement to be successfully accomplished.
Gotcha.
If you're jumping 1 centimeter off the ground versus 40 inches, the mechanical objectives are consistent, but how much force you have to generate is obviously different.
So like,
But forces must be generated.
you kind of like you're the mechanical objective is potentially it could be just leaving the ground in a jump. But like, is the mechanical objective like, just to clarify this, is like if somebody wants to dunk,
Yes.
that like the first piece is like you have to produce enough force to leave the ground, right?
With
But
an
then you also
upward
have to
velocity.
be able to translate your
Yes.
body mass high enough to be able to potentially slam a ball over the rim, right?
Yes.
Is that what you mean by mechanical objective, or like give me or dumb it down even further for me? I guess.
Yeah. So the framework that I try to encourage my students to use is like, okay, the very, very top level is the task objective. Dunking a ball. That is the task objective. Associated with that, our center mass height has to be high enough such that we can reach the basket and dunk the ball. How do we make sure our center mass velocity can reach high? Well, you need upward velocity so that we can go from where we are at on the ground to our maximum point during the flight phase, right, while we're in the air. So those are all of the associated task objectives. Supporting the task objectives are the mechanical objectives, and these are defined by, I like to define them by, taking the impulse momentum framework. So, okay, the task objective is to get our center mass height very high. The mechanical objective is having an upward velocity of our center of mass at takeoff, which means generation of upward forces. So generation of upward forces, that is the mechanical objective. In the case of a running jump, we also have to consider how much velocity we are carrying into the takeoff, right? And everybody nowadays become very familiar of the going from horizontal to vertical. So then the mechanical objectives are twofold. It's still generating upward forces, but you also now have to generate backward forces, right, to control that horizontal velocity. And in turn, that allows you to load your lower limb joints stretch shortening cycle to generate more force overall into the ground, which supports generation of upward forces. So mechanical objectives, I always think of it as, what are the force generation requirements? That's what the mechanical objectives are.
Gotcha. Okay. Love that. All right. I like this. This is cool. All right. Give us the third law.
All right. The third law, I think it's the least intuitive, because it's like, when I actually first learned about that law in like a science cartoon. It's about someone like trying to get away from a sea monster. And they're like, oh, how can we accelerate our boat in the sea? They're like, oh yeah, just push against the water. And like one force magically becomes two forces, right? Like why suddenly the action force? I should probably summarize the third law. So it's just, for every action force, there's an equal and opposite reaction force. Like how does one force become two forces magically? And it's really a matter of perspective. All this law is telling you is like, from the perspective, okay, so between two objects interacting, from the perspective of the first object that's applying a force onto the second object has to be interacting back. Otherwise, there's no interaction at all. Let's say if you are trying to push against the ground, but the ground is never there, you just push into nothing, right? There's no force because there's no interactions. But whenever there's interactions between two things, then from the perspective of one thing, there's a force, and then on the other thing, there's the reaction of that force. So having a reaction force, and in human movement, the reason we use ground reaction force is that we only have to consider things external to our body. Gravity is an effect from the Earth acting externally onto our body. It's the same exact thing for the ground reaction force. It's an external force. By taking the perspective of looking at how the world acts on us, we can analyze human movement the exact same way we'll analyze a box on a slope. By looking at all of the things acting externally to us. That's why in the case of a running jump, we say, okay, the ground reaction force, even though yes, we are the ones that's pushing into the ground, but for the analysis of the mechanics of a running jump, we like to look at things outside of our body. We know, okay, gravity is pulling us down. Our initial momentum is going forward and slightly down. So what are the forces externally that has to act on our body in order for us to go up and slightly forward? We know, okay, by doing that, the forces must be backward and upward. So that's why it's a convenience measure in terms of mechanical analysis of the body, but it's not directly tied to what we actively think we're doing, because we're thinking we're pushing down, right? We're pushing forward. But the forces that we write, that we describe, that we research and measure with force plates are the exact opposite, because we're thinking about external forces.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. So, thank you for the rundown. I love that. That'll be a good refresher for hopefully anybody who listens to this, or a good intro or good summarization. So, take me through. You played basketball. When did you stop? I mean, I hope you're still playing basketball. But well, I guess how old are you, Sam?
I'm 28.
28. Okay. And you got your PhD last year?
Yes, yes. So I played all the way through. I played for university, and then I came here. I went to I was just playing around with some of the guys on the college team just for fun sometimes, and then it's COVID, so didn't get to play too much. But I maintained the dynamic activities
Good.
even through professorship. Yeah.
So prior to like going on this quest, like you could not dunk, correct? Like you
Yes.
couldn't dunk, but like honestly, the main benefit of your getting your PhD, dude, is that you can dunk now, right?
That's what I thought. There's a joke of like the best athletes become pros, the second best athletes become coaches, and then the third way the athletes become researchers. That's my
Yeah. I mean, dude, I don't know about the coaches thing. There's some like absolute like I'm not an amazing like athlete in any way, shape, or form, but I think like I think there's a lot of variability in that, but I think it's good that you. I just think it's cool amongst other things that you're like, yeah, I'm gonna pursue this and I'm gonna keep doing it. And dunking is dope. So I guess where I want to transition this is just like take us kind of on your quest. Like
yes,
you have the question, you have maybe your theory, right? And then it sounds like you've played basketball your whole life, right? And you know, maybe even some of it is just like you if you could go back to like 16-year-old you, and you don't have to do this right away, but like you could go back to 16-year-old you and be like, all right, dude, these are the things to like work on and do so that you can be dunking by the time you're 18. But like take us through the quest a little bit if that makes sense.
yeah. Um, Honestly, so when I was still in China, by the second year of our middle school, I set out with a goal to dunk basically. Like in between classes, whenever we walk by the outdoor basketball courts at our school, everybody would try to go for a touch, right? At that point, if you can touch the net, you're like, all right, you're kind of athletic. If you can touch the backboard, I was pretty good. Like, so I had like okay base jumping ability, but I've always been quite heavy. But that was when the goal first came about, and with that, I tried the Air Alert program with a lot of bodyweight plyometric blade based exercises. Didn't do a whole lot, if I'm being honest. And that's sort of been the case where I started touching rim around high school. So none of these is that impressive athletics wise. I'm 5'9", I've been 5'9" like forever. So I kind of had a decent baseline from just jumping a lot while I play basketball, getting some knee pain with growth, but that kind of went away magically. Like I didn't do any program. I think it's just a matter of time, and then switching to different sports. Because like basketball is not always in season when I was in Australia, and definitely not the thing when I was in the UK. So when I moved to the UK, I mean the quest continues, but then I was running some cross country because I learned from I actually heard from Nate Robinson on an article. It's like, if you want to play basketball really well, you need to have the lung of a swimmer. So I was doing like a good amount of swimming, I was doing a good amount of cross country running, and I become like an okay runner. My high school coach actually always called me top heavy, but just because I did any amount of upper body exercises. So my vert pretty much plateaued all the way through. And until I get into university in the end of my first year, that's when I really started giving a go with like a proper strength training program. But what I think to me back then the problem was I wasn't jumping consistently with maximum effort. Because at that time I was trying to balance it with like, oh, I really want to get better skill wise and athletics wise and strength wise to make so that we can make the first team at the university, like the Blues team. That's been my dream. So
Because
in
to
that
some
case,
extent,
yeah,
like you're 5'9", like even it's dope to dunk, but like really, what's gonna get you on the court is being like a really good basketball player, like good you know how
yes,
to move. Like there's like there's only so much time to work on so many things, and you almost have to cost benefit analysis, like what's gonna make me like an asset, right? And you being able to dunk would be really dope. Don't get me wrong, but like you're probably going to be playing point or shooting guard type of like what position did you play?
I play the point or shooting guard, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, which is fine. And it's being able to dunk at those is dope, but like also
Hmm.
like you can make a good team without being able to dunk, I guess too.
Yeah, for sure. And I think to me the most beneficial part of like this whole pursuit, where Honestly, I didn't necessarily give myself a timeline where I would just keep chipping at it. Like in season, through the off season, I just keep chipping at it. Where if I can, I'll try to like do maximum effort jumps. But what's nice is that in pursuit of that dunking, I got a pretty decent first step.
Yeah.
So like I have a nice boost of speed. I'm pretty strong and honestly quite heavy for my height and my position. So once I get a step, I can like give the even the big guys a little bit of a bump to create some space and get inside. So it's almost like tangentially beneficial to like my own play. But really, the vert increases started through the PhD years, not necessarily through the research. It's just that without the structured practices and seasons of basketball, I have like more time to be more consistent. And what's nice is there's a low rim at my school. I think to me that's the most specific to the actual skill of dunking. Learning at that time, people like within the dunk community also were more aware of like, okay, here's generally what should happen with the plant foot, the first foot to contact the ground, what needs to happen for the block, for the second foot to contact the ground. But the theories are all good. I think to me, a big limitation is like the intent, or really the opposite of intent, the inhibitions, right? How much you're not willing to put force into the ground. I think to do that, an underrated aspect is that you want to pick a pair of shoes that you are really comfortable with slamming your foot into the ground. Because I had my barefoot shoe phase where I was trying to do it while playing basketball. I was trying to do it while like I was in the club track team, just for fun, thinking that practicing high jump once a week with helmet jumping. Not really, honestly, because my 1 foot jumping, especially off the left foot, where the technical side of high jump just became way too annoying for me, and I was enjoying like just the general plyo type workouts way more than the actual jumping into the.
So you said like what was beneficial though was having like a low rim or like
Yes, a
like
lowered rim.
Like basically like saying because this I'm gonna ask you near the end like because I'm
Yeah.
37 and like this is something that I've honestly had a lot of like social, like psychosocial stress lately. Like,
Yes.
I'm opening a bigger gym. I have a kid, and we're having another kid, and we've had some other stuff. I have felt like
Yeah.
crap training recently, but one of my
Yeah.
goals is to dunk. I can
Hmm.
touch 9.5. I can't touch 10, but like what I have heard and what I have seen, and I actually installed a good hoop in my driveway that can go up and down, and like just being able to dunk on 9 foot because I don't think I can dunk on 9 foot. I like just being able to dunk like on the lower hoops and then like gradually progressing that up over time intuitively makes a lot of sense. Now, like specifically, like how often do I practice? How many reps of this do I do? What other things? Like, there's a lot of potential nuance there, but the simple like goal oriented hey,
Hmm.
progressively work on trying to touch trying to dunk on a higher rim is like a very good intuitive starting point, is it not?
I think so. It's the most foolproof way. Like there's many ways that we can work on technique in terms of like, okay, you want to make sure you're running the approach a certain way and contact to the ground a certain way, but at the end of the day, it really is years of work. But what's nice is it shouldn't be like a years of grind where
Yeah.
you grind for absolutely 6 months with a single focus
Yeah.
to dunk. More so if you jump once a week. And then I think the most important thing is outside of that is like maintaining body composition, making sure you're hitting like your good max strength stimuli. And if you're running and jumping as hard as you can, it in itself is a pretty good stimuli in terms of your strength and power capabilities. And your tissues will get used to it as well. So once a week is manageable. And I like to think of myself as like, okay, you're a working adult, right? You have a busy life. You don't have time to train multiple times a week. Maybe you can only lift a few times a week. What are the most important factors? Jumping once a week maximally, staying lean and light, which I think for most of us is probably the most difficult part. I love
Oh
food.
damn, yeah, it's real easy to eat. Like it's real I've been I got down so I'm gonna compete in Olympic weightlifting again in August, and I compete at like I think it's 93 ish.
How tall are
92
you?
kilos, right? So I'm like around I'm between 200 and 210, but I was
Yeah.
tracking and then I stopped tracking and I just like, dude, I was eating my little boy's snacks and,
Hmm.
like picking up the extras. It's real easy to eat extra food, like in this country. I mean, hope, well, there's some other factors, but it is very easy to eat 500 to 1,000 calories more than you need, right? Um, the other thing you said there, like, do you know Dan Cleather? Do you follow Dan Cleather?
Yes. Yes.
Like, I don't know, like this book, I just keep it close to me but you mentioned there, like, it's like it's one of these things that is a longer than this like super specific, uh, short term, like 6 months I'm gonna dunk type of thing, like, and that's just kind of the nature, especially like the older I got. I wish
Yes.
I could go back to like 16-year-old me and be like, dude, like you are way more likely to actually hit the goals you want if you just like do this, like strength train 2 to 4 times a week, do some jumping, and then do some sprinting. Like you're way more likely to just build this super big base that will help you than these 6 weeks, like to 6 weeks to really rep out like XYZ, right? Because you inevitably do improve with those like super targeted things, but also like the plateau and the peak leads to like almost like a shitty trough of like not feeling good or lack of motivation or whoever knows, right? But so I love that you said that, because it's like the more people we can get, kind of like, again, cool if you make it in 6 months or like you're really athletic, awesome. But like the more people who just get that, like, this is a long game, and having multiple goals and working on some of this stuff is like really cool, and a lot of it's just do good training for a long time, right?
One thing I think is super underrated. I don't think I hear a lot of people talking about it. Is like, what's the rush, right? Most of us that wants to do a cool thing, right, dunk or whatever, it's not about going pro or hitting a specific standard. So if you push yourself into a bind trying to say, okay, you have to do this by whatever time, that might make the journey a lot less enjoyable. And also, whenever you see another thing you're interested in, where otherwise you should be well within your rights to explore whatever new interests you might have, because that's what life is, right? New things come up. There's more things you wanted to try. Like, why not? I got into a bit of Olympic weightlifting, um, almost like an exploration over the past couple of years, primarily through like Will Rattel's content.
Yeah.
Just like, hey, it's kind of fun. I've seen all of the debates, like I've listened to the long discussions like power clean, useful or not. I've done like breakdowns of the THP guys where they have like a statistical study that tries to argue power clean is the best statistical predictor of jump height, where it's pretty similar to deadlift in terms of the actual strength of the predictors. So
Hmm.
there can be detours, and if you play the long game and you play the idea of there's really no rush, right?
Yeah.
Then you can explore a lot of things, keep stacking productive training, but you don't have to burn yourself out. And
It's
to
just like
me, yeah,
you're just better, like, it's just more likely that you are going to enjoy, like you said, enjoy it, and like you're just more likely to like not get wrapped up in it and get frustrated, because like there's always going to be, like, one of the things in like the rehab space is there's so many protocols, like for like, hey,
yes,
protocol to fix this, and that's great. It's still like you should utilize some form of a system, but it's still inevitably a human that is going to have all sorts of variables like happen, and like, again, we want to manage what we can manage, but like you can't. It's weird, it's like paradoxical, but you can't like force it. You can practice and you can try, but then it like kind of emerges when it's like when you've done the right work, right, over the right period of time, right? So I don't know.
adaptations take time, right?
Yeah.
Adaptations take time, no matter whichever adaptations you're trying to go for. Motor learning
Yeah.
takes time, especially not to say 28 is too old or anything, but like we none of us that wants to dunk to our later years, it very very rarely do we have the tens of thousands of reps that
Yeah.
other gifted dunkers do. So we have to play the long game. That's almost like built into the system, where through years and years of just consistency, you can gradually reduce your inhibitions for like how much you can put for how much force you can put into the ground, the positions your body allows you to hit, and you get to enjoy the process, which is the best part.
I like that you've utilized basically we often think about like the active production of force, but some of it, and like this has just kind of struck me, it's like I think I'm very inhibited. Like I'm very like I've gotten a lot stronger. I played soccer growing up. I played everything until high school, and then I played soccer and I played football. And I got like good at running distance, and I think a lot of that was just like I didn't have, I didn't have this requirement to like move really fast, but like I think I was just like also quasi inhibited. Like I just didn't let myself like I couldn't like turn off whatever it is to like let myself move freely, right? And in the soccer field, like it's funny because like I actually was faster when I was like chasing a ball or chasing another
Yes.
person in like from like a dead stop to try to get to like a 40-yard dash or like get off the line or something. I was just so slow. And it's like, yeah, that's like your body almost trusting that you're capable of doing this thing. Because like force is the accelerator, but it's also like the brake, right? Like
Yes,
at the
deceleration.
same
Yes.
time, right? So I like that you brought that up multiple times. What I guess because you've said that, like, what has made you like realize that?
When I so I went to a few dunk camps. When I was in my first dunk camp, John Evans said I have no block foot. To me, it looks like I was planting into the ground, but I wasn't nearly as aggressive in doing so. And the thing is that if I try to force myself to like really stomp the block foot or really step on it, there's always some sort of discomfort in the lower limb. So then the idea is like, okay, man, it's almost like the inhibitions are a protective mechanism, right, to prevent excessive amount of forces going through the body, and it's a constant interaction of your nervous system deciding how much force it's willing to exert, and your musculoskeletal system figuring out how much force they can resist, they can transmit through, how much force they can handle. And it's almost like you have to do enough reps, and then you have to go back and look. Wow, now you can hear the difference in how you contact the ground, particularly with the block foot, because in a 2-foot running jump, the second foot to contact the ground, the quote unquote block foot, it has much higher forces. It has a much shorter ground contact duration, and you can argue it's quite similar to how a 1-foot running jump takeoff should be. It should be quite stiff, very aggressive, and it's a high amount of forces. And most normal people, most normal athletes that's on this journey to dunk, which I consider myself to be one of them, it's like that's the least familiar part, and that's the part that took the longest to really get. And I've had a pretty bad left ankle injury, so that actually made it a lot hard. Like it builds a whole other layer of inhibitions around stomping with the left ankle. But my right ankle, that's quite strong, and like in any sort of plyometric test, like single leg hops bounds, the right foot always performs much better. If I do a left-right jump where the right leg is the block foot, I can really stomp into the ground, and there's really no problem with it. So within yourself, you might be able to be like a much more. You'll feel like you're limited. You feel like almost a little bit scared, in terms of like, oh, I don't know if I can put as much force into the ground as I should for maximum performance.
Yeah.
But then you just have to keep trying, right? And what's nice about dunking is like you don't always have to just do a max touch. Even if you can throw yourself a lob and let it bounce on the ground, and it takes again years of practice to get really good at that. For me, I started trying that in my third year on the undergraduate, and I only got pretty good like 44 or 5 years later, and I've been fairly consistent at practicing it. But once you have that, then the target shifts externally, right?
Yeah.
You're trying to time and catch the ball. In that case, the way I think about it is like I just think about jumping hard and then go get the ball.
Mm-hmm.
So then whenever you can associate the internal cue of jumping hard with stomping the ground really hard, then that can be a way forward.
Yeah. Man, there's a lot of wisdom in a lot of the things you're saying. Just like That it takes years of practice to do some of these things, and like yeah, you first and foremost, that's like the hard part about a lot of this stuff for like being a human. It's like everybody's expectations, I think, in the Instagram age, and probably always, like even like, I mean, I got into like, I was in the weight room as a 14-year-old kid. I had no idea like what the heck was going on, and like it wasn't really anything against the coaches at that time. It was very much like a hammer strength type of program. I just like I just was like, I didn't know what the heck was going on, and I was just like trying to survive, right? And then like I got into CrossFit at like 18, and like CrossFit was cool because it was kind of a kick in the butt, and it was actually doing hard stuff, which a lot of people weren't doing. But it wasn't really necessarily like athletic development either, right? But then I kind of like started to get in like to like strength, in my like a couple of years after CrossFit, and basically I just realized like, oh, like I want to get stronger, and getting stronger, doing all this stuff takes a lot of time. So Sam kind of got booted, but I was just saying like most of the stuff that we like want to have happen takes longer than we would like it to take, and that's okay. That's just the nature of a lot of things in life. But like you should still train, and yeah, but like in pursuing a dunk, it's gonna teach you something. Pursuing jumping high, pursuing getting strong, it's gonna teach you something, and that's often like the good stuff. Again, doesn't always leave you feeling amazing because you compare yourself to other people. But what I want to ask Sam as we wrap up is like, what's next for you, Sam? Like, what are you gonna keep studying? What's your area of focus in? It sounds like you're teaching, which is awesome, but like, what's next for you?
So for my dissertation, I've done actually half of that being baseball pitching research. So there's some more explorations I want to do into the sort of science of baseball pitching. Like there's a few different analyses I wanted to try to better understand, how things are being quantified. When I was going through my PhD, I was trained in thinking really carefully about the methods of how we quantify the biomechanics. It's one of the best, greatest values, the best assets of biomechanics is in its ability to quantify what's happening in the sport. But then there's a lot of like AI startups nowadays in sport that's saying, hey, give us video footage, we're going to give you biomechanical data. But how good are those biomechanical data? How useful is it? How reliable and sensitive it is to what we're actually trying to accomplish. So some lines from my baseball research wants to look into that. And I'm fairly happy with where I wrapped up with the basketball jumping biomechanics research, because my first one sort of looks like how each leg contributes to control the body's momentum. The second leg compares a jump without the ball to a dribble dunk. So that's to answer the age-old questions of like, why am I suddenly jumping lower whenever I have to dribble a basketball? And turns out it's super duper complicated, probably the most complicated paper of my PhD. And the third topic in my PhD was like which factors are good for jump height, like which biomechanical factors. That's surprisingly simple, but also that's probably why it's like the most popular out of my three papers, because everyone's like, oh yeah, more forces into the ground, more running approach velocity, more center mass like dip, meaning how low you get during your jump to your takeoff, how much that directly correlates with more jump height. And those were kind of my three basketball jumping papers. Now I wanted to look more into basketball shooting. Like I've made a lot of posts about like the NBA biomechanics initiative, but I just haven't been impressed with a lot of the shooting biomechanics research out there in terms of like how are the shooters controlling their body to perform the shot. So I have like a couple data collections planned for September where we hope to get like D3 basketball athletes, going through a shooting protocol and to look at how they control their body, how they shoot under different circumstances. And that will allow us to like answer questions nobody else have ever dug into in like the realms of shooting biomechanics, like how you do handling footwork, how you controlling for shooting off the dribble versus shooting off a catch, how are you controlling your velocity going into a shot, because a lot of the research done nowadays is just catch and shoot. It's only catch and shoot, and I liken that to only looking at counter movement jumps. You don't really get that many catch and shoot even at the D3 level. So that I'm super excited about. And then the other line of research is like I wanted to look at the biomechanics of different plyometric exercises. A lot easier to collect the data for, a lot easier to capture. And I wanted to take like basically some of the plus plyo stuff where like Matt is one of the collaborators that I chat with about, hey, what are the biomechanical demands of different plyometric exercises? How safe can we make it as a progression like biomechanically such that we can have older adults return to dynamic activities and really like be able to push it in the scientific community? Because I know there's a lot of work done in like what we call like the practitioner space, right? Things being done in practice, but then it's a lot harder, but it's a lot more worthwhile to test things scientifically. Like we can't always build a program that's realistic, like something you give to clients that you would in a exercise science study. But it's worthwhile to explore, hey, what are the rankings of intensities for different plyometric exercises, and how do we know when you're ready for the next step? Let's say you're able to do a deep tier lunge jump. What does it mean in terms of your balance? What does it mean in terms of your power measures that's like clinically relevant, right? We want to push out a exercise progression that's for free, that can be accessed like by much more people than just our little circle in the performance-based Instagram circle. So that is the long-term goal. It's super aggressive. I'm kind of being bogged down by IRB applications where you have to write all of these documents down in terms of like, hey, obviously we are ethical people, we want to protect our participants, but there is so much detail we have to hash out, and that actually make me like kind of want to step away from this research for a couple of days, just to take a breather and then come back to it once the mind is a bit recovered.
Do you find it hard to like not stew on the problems that you like working on, like the you like I just what's his name? What's his last name? The Spurs guard.
Wembanyama.
Yeah, Wembanyama. Like right, he was drawing in the park the other day, and people were like, he's not locked in, but like actually, like, dude, you gotta rest. Like you gotta chill out, right? I have a hard time. I run my own business. I like rehab and coach people virtually and in person. Like, it's like even I have a good work. It's better than me working in a clinic. That, like I used to work in type of thing. It's 100% better than that. But it's almost harder because I'm constantly stewing on like how can I get better? How can I do X, Y, Z? But how do you manage that? Because a lot of your this thing uses a lot of energy, right?
Yes. Yeah. I do a mix of things. Like I'm a little bit of a gamer, so one of like the fun things is like I play one of the games kind of competitively. So I wanted to like play ranked, be a PhD, and also dunk. I think that's like a super hilariously niche dynamic. But yeah, you kind of have to just do things that forces you to focus on that thing. And that's fun, right? So then you actually can't afford to think about the work.
Yeah.
Or sometimes the work just gets so annoying that I just don't want to think about it, And that's how it is. How it ends up being sometimes,
Yeah.
Even when I was working with the Marlins, when I was working at the school here, there's always going to be some things that just makes you sort of want to turn away, and that's your body's sign. That's the inhibitions. Your body is like, hey, let's shut down this for a little bit until you're ready to come back.
What game is it?
It's Smite 2. Yeah, it's a free game.
It's free. I've been playing this game called Hades. Have you ever heard of Hades? Like
yes.
It's fun. I need like 20 minutes of just like lock in and do something, like you said, focus on something that takes your brain off of everything else, right?
And you have to focus, otherwise it's gonna suck.
Yeah, right. 100%. You're gonna die, right? All right. Last question. Well, who's your NBA team in general?
Oh, that's a fun question. Before I used to say, I just love watching good basketball. But after being in New York, when I got there, it was the Julius Randle years when they were just starting to turn around, and New York forever now.
Okay, so I know who you're picking. I know who you're picking tonight.
I was legit stressed out watching the Knicks play in the finals.
Yeah, dude. I love it. So, Sam, thanks so much for being here. Where do people find you?
Yes, so I'm on, I guess most commonly on Instagram, Sam underscore likes underscore biomechanics slash underscore PhD. I don't want to like be too pretentious to do like a, the biomechanics guy or the biomechanics professor. I feel like that's too pretentious. That's why from years ago, I opted with the fact that I like biomechanics, right? I'm never gonna proclaim myself to be the expert on it,
Yeah.
but I definitely like it. And the idea is, through the content I make other people like
Yeah.
biomechanics, and also try to clear up some things that's not necessarily biomechanics in the academic sense, where there's a lot of quote unquote biomechanics out there that that's nowhere close to anything we do like any biomechanics conferences or biomechanics journals.
Yeah. Yeah. Gosh, that's a good thing to talk about. Maybe we'll have you on for a second visit, a second episode down the road here, and get into what isn't biomechanics. But I also appreciate just the humility. Like even me, like you're a PhD. I have a doctorate in physical therapy. I don't even care. I don't even really like being called. I do like it is. My ego kind of does like to be like called Dr. Dave, but I'm not like a PhD. I'm not an MD, but also there are people who have those things that aren't very smart or they're whatever. Who knows? But like the humility of Instagram is like such a highlight reel and such a
Yes.
like look how good I am and look how smart I am that like and don't get me wrong, like you're clearly smart, like I think, but what always draws me in is those people who you can tell are just being real, like, and that's also weirdly become cliche, like just be real, but like actually be real, like be a human, talk about the stuff you care about, have fun. So I appreciate your take very much. I'm gonna consistently work one time a week. I'm gonna hit some max effort
Yep.
jumps here, dude. We'll see where it takes me.
Well, hopefully the inhibitions go away.
I appreciate that. Thanks so much, Sam.
All right.